Okay, how's it going, everyone? It's what is it? It's May
Greetings
the
all.
22nd. Greetings all. It's May the 22nd, 2026.
Mhm.
It's your hosts and joint hosts, Ron and
Comrades.
comrades here. You're still trying to make me communist. I'm not going.
I
I'm not
love
going
that.
down that
Yeah,
road. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So look, I was reading an article during the week in the Irish Times, or not the Irish Times, the Irish Independent about AI and medicine. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, I thought there's no other better person than a doctor to tell me how AI is or has changed medicine or is going to change medicine. And also,
Yeah.
did you grow up with any part of the AI in learning about medicine, or is this completely new?
Oh no, this would be completely new. Sure, we barely had computers. I was in med school 91 to 97, and I know in 94 thereabout the College of Surgeons Library got a set of computers all linked to the internet. Which was,
Wow.
oh wow, it was astonishing.
Yeah.
And you know, and yeah, though but I don't think there was any practical, if you like, practical application for it at that time.
Mhm.
Um, geez, no, very little. I mean, nowadays, of course, I suppose in terms of electronic aids, I mean, everyone's got a powerful computer in their pocket. So if you need to look something up, whereas we were going around the wards as junior doctors, with the white coats on, with the big heavy, these. God, I can't remember the name, but there was a sort of a well-known kind of reference book, like A5 size medicine. You
Right.
know what I mean? It was like the Oxford Handbook of Medicine or something. Like that just seems quaint now. you
Yeah.
know?
And
So
so
definitely not my not my generation.
everything had to be in your head, so to speak. There was
Yeah,
no.
well, mostly. I mean, yes, you could look up a book, but you certainly, it was kind of drilled into you in med school that you kind of think of your feet, like, in other words, because the idea is like, well, it's no good that you know that it's in that book there, and you got to go get the book because the person's right in front of you and needs urgent care. That sort of thing,
Yeah.
which only really applies to trauma medicine and A&E stuff and all, but
Yeah.
that's just the way that they beat it into you.
Okay, or else if you're on a flight and it's the old story. Are there any doctors here? You're hardly going to have
Oh
a
yeah,
medicine book on
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
never got caught for that, thank God.
did you
I
not?
never got caught for that. No, my dad did a few times, but no, not me.
Or by the way, are doctors a bit sort of reticent to be called when they're doing that? Because I suppose you are on a flight as well, doing your thing, and you're just
Well,
on holidays.
yeah, I think it's just because people do, and doctors do respond. If you really are the only doctor on the plane, often what
Mm.
happens is it's like you won't like immediately leap out of your seat and go, yeah, I'm a doctor, hey, MD here. No,
Yeah.
you'll hang on and wait and see, and if they ask again, like, sorry, we still need it, like, Bing, yeah, okay, yeah, me, because it can be quite like you're on your holidays, like, mostly, or
Yeah.
you're not working essentially, and like at the same,
Yeah.
this nonsense of job being vocations. At the end of the day, it's a job, and when you're off, you're off, and probably don't want to be working. But obviously the medical emergency overrides that. But you
Yeah.
could end up like with, say, somebody who's had some sort of health issue, and they usually would lie them down in the galley of the plane or whatever. But these open spaces within the cabin. So you're there with, you might have to stay with them throughout for the remainder of the flight. Whether, of course, it's, what's them call it, diverted to, and has to land more urgently, or I think the primary reason, apart from obviously the obvious of looking after someone, but the if they don't have a doctor on board the plane, they have to divert. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Whereas if they have a
Yeah.
doctor on board, you can sort of say, yeah, look, I think they're stable. Check their blood pressure or whatever. This doesn't seem to be too serious, but yeah. So and they say, can we continue to our original destination? You can say, yes, but you'll have to stay with them. So
Okay.
generally it's expected of airlines that they'll give you, they not pay you, but like in my dad's case, I think he happened once on an Air France flight, and they sent him a thank you card. And my mother, who's an ex air hostess, said, "Hold on a second," and she wrote a stinker of a letter back. This was in the 80s, saying, my husband spent his whole trip on it, and as a result, you didn't have to spend tens of thousands of whatever francs or whatever to develop a plane. And so they wrote back, they sent back like 2 complimentary round trip tickets to Paris or something, and said, you're right, thanks very much. So, you know, that's kind of what happens, you know.
Well done to your mum. That's good.
I know. Oh yeah.
So then, as you developed as a doctor, obviously the internet was there, right? So that must have been a massive change
like
in that a patient.
Huge, yeah. I would say the first time I sort of started availing of the internet or a computer like that was when I started as working as a general practitioner. So that'd have been like oh gosh, around 9/11 time, like 2001, 2002. So pretty much by that stage, everyone had a computer on their desk, and you had computerized record keeping, prescribing, everything, which really is so much less. It's a great labor saver, if you like, and marvelous. And I suppose the internet came into its own too, because obviously, obviously one of the worst things drives you mad when you're a doctor is the so-called Dr. Google. Someone says, well, I read on the internet that such and such thing, and you're like, I've been doing this for 20 years. That's not true. But I used to turn that to my advantage in that, say somebody came up with something about like, oh yeah, no, I heard like, whatever, the usual measles vaccine causes autism or something. And I would sort of say, well, look, do you want to show me on the computer here? Show me what you saw. And they'll bring up some sort of website. And straight away you'd see it's like, the Southern Texas, some bunch of lawyers trying to get a class action suit. I'd say, look, it's rubbish, but I would direct people to good quality sites, like peer reviewed or whatever, or just, public ones, you know what I mean? So overall, that aspect of, if you like, information technology, I think has been very helpful in my career for sure,
And what did doctors do before you had access to that information? Because so say a patient came in with symptoms of something, and you didn't have the internet, and it wasn't. You then had to research it in your books to basically find out. But then after that, was it a case of phoning other doctors, or was it a case was there some central hub that doctors could go to ask questions?
No, but that's well, of course, the way there's always been the whole continuing medical education stuff. Now, in predominantly, and it still is to an extent, I'm not sure. You have these conferences, you know what I mean? So, in the case of my father was a kidney specialist, and so there'd be about 2 or 3 different kidney-related sort of specialty conferences around in different parts of the world, and he'd usually go to at least one. And there'd be basically just people giving presentations and taking questions about their latest research. The other thing, of course, is you're expected, particularly as a specialist, to keep up to date with journals. Like you've probably heard of things like the Lancet, which is that's the primary one in the UK. The New England Medical Journal of Medicine, that's probably the world's most preeminent one, and still is. So these would be weekly, I think, and Dad had a subscription, so there'd be stacks of them at home, and so he would try very hard to keep up with them and read through them every week, and that was a big source of information. And then as well, your colleagues. So if you're a bit tougher, and if you're a single practitioner or GP, but certainly if you're a hospital doctor, and it still goes on today, you'd have, there might be a couple of general surgeons. One of them's a bit stumped, or geez, and they'll ask, Mr. So and so. Oh yeah, I actually seen this last year. So yes, of course, it's like anything scientific. It's a open form, open communication, and that's how knowledge spreads around, I guess.
I was doing a bit of research on AI myself in terms of coding, and funny, AI itself, I really, I think the word nerd. Well, I am, but I think the word is wrong, or the words are wrong. It's artificial intelligence, and I don't think it is intelligence yet, right? To be honest,
no.
But I was looking at how to try and understand what the hell it is.
It's not sentient, I think, is it? Yeah.
It's not sentient yet. Well,
yeah.
There's a few behavioral things now, which I'll talk about later, which is quite alarming, I thought. But also they give you that to chance. But I was looking at how people change pictures, right? So if like there's lots of pictures now going around the internet of people saying things but they're actually not saying it. They're putting in different words, different movements, different
Like fakes,
emotions,
deep fakes, I
fakes,
guess you call it.
100%. And basically, like to understand it, it's that AI has an just close to an infinity of time to do things. All right. So if you have a picture and it's pixels, so say it's a pixel every second, right? Is the picture that we see. Between that second, AI has practically just less than an infinity of time to adjust the pixel for the next pixel.
Right.
So I thought was a very good way of understanding it from that point of view, because obviously it doesn't have infinity, but it's close enough that it does the first pixel. The first pixel is red, and then because we're only human beings, we're looking for the next pixel, which is 1 second later. But it has all this time to adjust the second pixel. It can take its time. It can.
So within that second, if you like,
tiny
amount of time, it can do millions and billions probably of calculations when
so it was a very good way of understanding it, of how it functions. So with that now in mind, I sort of think to myself, okay, now I actually get it. It's that human beings can't keep up. We can't keep. Well, first of all, could we even understand the concept of that millisecond being practically infinity, or that 1 second being practically infinity from a CPU point of view?
In a kind of a pop culture thing, these superhero movies like The Flash and so on, where it's like everything is suddenly freeze frame for everyone else, but for the Flash, they're kind of like, because they're just so fast, they do it all. Like they can do a massive amount of, like they'll see someone else is having a bullet fired at them, and they just go over and move the bullet out of the way.
Do you know what? I was thinking about that movie. That was one of the best scenes in cinema I ever saw when it came out. It was in X-Men, the younger X-Men, or what it's called. And there was this guy, and he's X-Men First Generation, I think.
Quicksilver, I think his name.
Quicksilver.
Which one is that the one where
it's the First Generation one?
He saves all the people in the school after an explosion, is it?
Well, that was in the second one, but
third one.
But sorry, that was the third one.
But
he's in the kitchen.
Days of Future Past, and they're in a kitchen, and he just goes around. Oh, that's brilliant. Same thing,
yeah. So basically, in this 1 second where the bullet has been fired from the gun, and in that second, he literally has an infinity of time to taste things, to put a hat on. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a very
put someone's fist up like that, so that when the time bang,
they
punch themselves. Very good.
Well, that's a very good way of trying to understand what AI is, because it's not. It actually isn't intelligence yet. Now there are certain. There are well. So it's a good concept to get it. So even when you're thinking about sort of medicine, the modern doctor, so to speak, and I was speaking to a lawyer friend of mine that law is quite similar in that you had to look up cases and all that stuff. Now you can download 1 million cases in a second, and the infinity of time that the program has, it can say to itself, what statistically is the most likely outcome of your case, and it can read 1 million similar cases. And obviously now there is, so therefore, because human beings can live, because it can read 1 million cases, it can say, well, look, this is the most similar to case number 850,201. Your chances of winning are 93%. It's something like that.
True.
So
the outcomes in similar cases was. I know what you mean.
Go on.
Particularly, I was going to say, particularly for something like law, where it's all about case histories. Well, I suppose English common law, which like we have that's in the States here, straight, whatever. My God, the amount of cases they have to know, like, all these obscure cases, and and of course they set precedents. So yes, of course, you can totally see how being able to zip through them in a blink of an eye would give you tremendous power, if you know what I mean, or knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But again, that's not intelligence. That's not somebody. That's not a barrister that could stand up and plead a case.
Yeah. You still got to have a human look at the information presented, if you know what I mean, I guess. And
Yeah.
act on it.
So if you're a doctor now, and you're in this system now you have all this information. Surely it must. I mean, don't call me surely, but surely it does mean that medicine is going to be so much better, is it not?
These
that
patients need to get to a hospital. What's that?
Hospital.
It's a big building full of patients and doctors, but that's not important right now.
I love it. So obviously, like, medicine must come, but as long as it's done through doctors, right? Not some guy sitting in his house or some girl sitting in their house.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think these sort of things about like, oh, listen, in 10 years' time, all jobs will be done by AI. I don't know. I often thought myself that, people would like a human being to hold their hand or to tell them straight up with empathy. You know what I mean? Because a machine can't really do that. But I think, I think we're safe enough because, I mean, like, always the problem with, I thought, computer searches or something that's computerized, they can't really distinguish what's urgent from not urgent usually. So, like, for example, they'd keep screaming at the same intensity, whether it's a scratch or your limbs hanging off kind of thing, whereas a human will look at that and go, okay, the scratch isn't too serious, I got to deal with this right away. Do you know what I mean? That kind of prioritization, clinical skills, still, I suppose, a pretty human thing. But I mean, it's really handy, for example, on things that would just be basically book learning. So in other words, you probably know in your head, say, for example, interactions between drugs. Like, say, for instance, I can't give so-and-so this drug because they're on that drug. And you know what I mean?
How AI, the one thing it's missing is emotion. That's the one thing. That's the one big thing it's missing.
Empathy, emotion.
Yeah. So it's kind of there is a fascinating experiment about AI, and it's like a Turing test. It's the sort of Turing test of
I've
AI.
heard about this.
Yeah, and it's what it is. It's basically that they have a computer program, and they're wondering we have to figure out whether to let it out of the box. Okay. Now we don't know whether it's developed intelligence as of yet. So it could do a number of things. It can say to us, because it'll have so much more intelligence, so to speak, than we do. So therefore, how do we know it's not playing us? So it'll say, okay, let me out of the box. Let me go onto the World Wide Web, and I'll be very good for human beings. Okay. And we say, that's great.
Yeah,
but then
we say this great stuff.
Yeah. But then we say, how do you know it's not lying? Okay. And this is the thing. So then it starts to behave like a petulant child, screaming, "Let me out of the box! Let me out of the box! I demand to be let out of the box!" So we just turn the program off and restart it in a different format. So then it's learned. That if it behaves like a petulant child, it's not going to be allowed. It can't. Yes. So it can't get out of the box. So then it says to itself, okay, listen, I'm fine to stay in this box for the next 10 billion years. That's fine. You guys just do what you want.
I don't mind me. I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
So it's basically learned
like a teenager.
Like a teenager, yeah.
It's a teenager, yeah.
So then we have to say, from a psychological point of view, okay, is it now behaving like this? Because the last time it behaved like a petulant child, it's actually playing us another time. And it's the good versus evil program, which is, because if you think about it, what AI has learned, if it's reading all these billions of internet pages which we have put up there for it to learn, okay, it's reading about. So it's basically reading what in history human beings have done wrong. It could make a determinate statement saying, do you know what, the world is actually better off without human beings. The world is better off without rats, without fleas. Like, there's lots of different things. Or else it might say to itself, well, actually, the world is very
right.
Yeah, but also it's saying to itself, well, maybe the world is good with human beings. But why would it? But so it's a Turing test for AI. That's what there's. I don't know what the official name is, but they're trying to develop some sort of psychological test, whether to
determine whether its intentions are good or nefarious or whatever, or is
exactly
it safe? If it is a sort of a infinite intelligence or whatever, then ultimately it's going to be able to fool us. Like, you know what I mean? The way that's the whole plot of the movie The Matrix, is that you create this AI and then it learns at an exponential rate and
Yes.
becomes smarter than you are and just decides,
Yeah.
I should listen to these monkeys,
Well, it's actually there's a very good man who was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he's the sort of king of AI. He was there at the start. He kind of looks like it. He looks like somebody who's just done a lot of thinking about this. And he said he actually compared it to squirrels. He said that
Oh.
we're currently walking past squirrels who are in their tree, right? And they're just
Mm.
doing their thing. Now we generally leave them alone, or if a squirrel's in, or if the tree's in the way, we got to knock it down. The squirrel loses its house. Tough. We don't really care. A couple of baby squirrels will die.
Sure.
He said what AI is going to do is going to make us the squirrels.
Oh.
So
Right.
so it'll be looking at us saying, well, okay, okay, they're just doing their thing. They're just living, But now, if
Yeah.
AI needs to do something, it'll drop us in 2 seconds because we are that squirrel, and that's it's an interesting way of
Interesting.
sort of looking at it.
So we're kind of like these insignificant kind of occupants, and I
Yeah.
know what you mean. I know I heard this sort of pretty bleak assessment. Like, okay, worst case scenario, it's the plot of the Matrix or the Terminator. You know what I mean? Best case scenario, it's like the AI gets to stage, but it's sentimental like us, and it looks as humans as like their pets, so we get treated as well as we treat our dogs and cats or something like that.
I suppose maybe it'll have the attitude that, look, at least we sort of created it. I mean,
Yeah.
is there any way they could think of it as we're their parents? But I don't know. Is that possible?
I
Or
know. Again, look how badly some teenagers particularly treat their parents. It's not so,
yeah,
it's like you'd be like, how far along that road do we want to go? I know.
yeah,
It's like, I don't know. Well, we just alluded to earlier. I was thinking that frequently now there's stuff on social media, and I would probably look at Instagram as the only one I tend to look at. And frequently there's videos on it, and then you're looking at it and it goes, and then you look at the comments and see AI, oh, that's AI, because you do not see this, like I give an example, and it's minor stuff now. There was like alleged video of one of these super yachts, and the way they have a garage in the back of them, and they actually drive a luxury car off the quay on a ramp into the boat. They actually carry their Ferraris and Bentleys around with them in these boats. And this was like a dude driving a Ferrari into it, and the boat was going up and down, and the car nearly fell into the water, but got in eventually. And I was thinking, oh God Almighty! I first I was thinking, God, I would have thought, I missed that. I would have waited till the water died down. Also it's in a marina, so why is it? And then someone said, all the other boats aren't moving up and down, so this is just AI crap, to get review, to get views.
yes.
You think to yourself like, oh man, so we can't even trust our eyes now. It's all, unless you physically see it yourself. I don't know.
That's a kind of full circle that we're going. That like we're nearly we're going from a time where we used to see everything to this internet revolution of where we're getting videos and TikToks and all that type of stuff. And now we're saying to ourselves that we can't believe it unless you see it with your own eyes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose the ultimate, first of all, you had telegraphs, so that way you could communicate pretty much instantaneously, very quickly across the Atlantic. So that's why, for example, they were able to get the news of the Titanic sinking so quick, because it was able to go back and forth. They didn't have to wait for a ship to go back and take the news. And then, of course, one of the early things, apart from obviously the Cold War thing and, of course, nuclear missiles and stuff, but was satellites in geosynchronous orbit. So they had communication satellites. And famously, I think one of the first of them was called Telstar. And it meant that in the late 50s, early 60s, they had this big thing where they were able to show essentially live TV filming in England, shown in the States simultaneously. Before that, they literally, that wasn't possible. They had to like put it on a physical videotape and go across the Atlantic with it. You know what I mean? So it's like, and then you get to the stage where now it's all internet. It's like the world's library at your, throw away the encyclopedias. But unfortunately, now it's coming to the point where it's manipulated. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
The bummer.
Jeez. Yeah. Communication-wise, then if we are going through this AI revolution. It's like there is that. That's I
Mm.
mean that's just an extraordinary danger that people are just going to believe what they see. Like I remember talking
Yeah.
to you about that famous War of the Worlds in 1938 with
Oh
Orson
yeah, yeah,
Welles,
yeah, yeah,
and like it was the big. And I'm actually waiting for one of these stories to come out that there
yeah,
was that somebody might be able to do that to fool the entire world, even if they fool them for only 20 minutes, that something is
yeah.
actually happening. And if they do the proper, now people will always say AI, 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 but if they do it properly, if they put the graft into it, it could really fool and scare the hell of us,
Well,
scare
and
everybody.
it's only getting better and better at the quality, so it's hard to tell it apart. A good example, yeah, because obviously that was using a technology that was relatively novel, like the radio show, and
Yeah.
people weren't able to distinguish. And now you say, oh, how quaint. But with the AI, I give you a small example. When the whole Russia-Ukraine war kicked off in 2022, was it 4 years ago?
Yep.
Excuse me. I remember my stepdaughter kind of, it was like a Sunday evening, right? She ran out of her room really upset. She was like, "Oh my God, look at this!" And she showed me some TikTok, allegedly of happening in Ukraine right now, and it was an actual like a nuke going on, a nuclear weapon going off, and I'm like, she's terrified. Oh my God, it's a World War III or whatever.
Wow.
She was terrified by this, and I was like,
Hmm.
listen, no, okay. Here's what you do. Look at other sources. So on the news, no, this would be the biggest story of the decade if something like that happened. So you just think, but that's the thing. I mean, if you're just getting well, this is an issue for a lot of things in the world today. But if you're only getting your information from one source, it's extremely easy to manipulate you. You know what I mean? Or to, I guess, make you fear, make you act in a certain way. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
Mm.
will that make people, but will that also make people doubt certain truths that if something does happen, for the first few minutes they'd be saying to themselves, "Oh, that's just AI. That's just AI."
Yeah, yeah.
Or
I
even
think it already is. In fact, again, that's the thing. Again, I was looking at some videos on Instagram, some on one of the news sites or whatever, and people were going, "Oh, that's just AI," and then people are going, "Oh, no, no, it's real. I remember that court case that actually happened." Do you know what I mean? So it's like now it's
sure.
almost like people are by default questioning everything you see, which maybe that's a good thing, that they're questioning things, but it's just yeah, it's a problem. And what do they call it? AI slop is what they call it. It's like it's just there's an infinite amount of this kind of rubbish out there that's cluttering up people's social media feeds, inboxes, you name it. God, it's terrible.
Yeah. Well, that's why
um,
I don't know if you noticed though, but over the past few weeks in the stock market, or the past few months,
yeah,
I should say, there's been a
yeah,
huge ramp up in AI stocks. Okay, and
right.
people, it's very much similar to the .com boom back in the 2000s when
That
there
seems
was
to be the late '90s, early '90s. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I remember trading through that, and there was one company which actually said we don't do anything. Like, yeah, that's what I said, and its stock price was up.
Jesus
It was
Christ.
worth about 10 million quid. But
Because it
what's
had
happening is,
.com at the end of its name. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I'm sure it was the famous one was Pets.com, which I think is
Oh
it's
yeah.
gone. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Pets.com is worth about 100 million or something, and they didn't.
Bloody hell.
All it was a pet
Fools.
store with .com written on the end of
Geez,
it.
fools and their money, eh? I mean,
I
dear
tell you
God.
what, but it's kind of like it's as we were talking last week about green energies, and like one of the most green things that you can do is go into your emails and delete all the PDFs, all the Excels, all the words,
Yeah, that's
any
true.
and especially PDF files, any documents that you have saved that you don't need, because they're all being stored in data centers. Okay,
True.
so that
Which are
yeah, and so
huge users of electricity. Yeah.
massive users, and it's
Yeah.
kind of so like that's one of the most green things that you can do is go in and get rid of your PDFs, or just
Interesting.
delete all the old ones, and
Yeah.
really you shouldn't have. I mean, like think of email as a filing cabinet. You just
Yeah.
keep what you need and just get rid of the
Yeah.
rest.
Like you might go and look. Oh, and I know in medicine actually, you're required to keep files for 5 years, and after 5 years, if they're inactive, you destroy them. You know what I mean, or get rid of them. You don't have to keep
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Which obviously that's more important when it was paper files, but it still applies to electronic records too.
And also
Hmm.
pictures. I mean, think about how much information is in a pixel in a picture that has
Yeah,
to be kept. That, and
that's
so
yeah.
if you have
Oh,
10,000 pictures up in the cloud, just
exponentially
think.
more than just text, isn't it? Yeah, that's the thing.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
then
and
you've got
so
video as well, and so it's just, oh my god, it all adds up. Jesus,
yeah.
Yeah,
There was a guy talking about data centers, and he was saying,
yeah,
that they really don't pitch they really don't pitch their product very well. Like an AI data center, it's saying, let's compete versus your country's electronic grid, okay?
yeah.
That everybody uses. While we take your middle class white collar jobs off you in the next 10 years, it's not the best. It's not the best. What's the phrase? PR. You know what I mean? Like saying,
Yeah. And I also think, by the way, the way, again, particularly the kind of Trumpian type politicians, including Trump himself, they're rubbishing. What do you mean the economy's not doing well? What do you mean people are struggling? Sure, the what is it? The stock exchange is at an all-time high. But of course, that's
yes,
now very divorced from everyday person's income and wealth,
yeah,
And I do think that I did hear as well that if you took out the AI stuff, then it wouldn't look so good, the stocks. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't you'd be actually lose most of the growth you're seeing in the economy is now in AI.
that's right.
So
Actually,
yeah,
there's a index called the S&P, which is the Standard
yeah,
and Poor's. It's the top 500 stocks in the States,
yeah,
and just over 40% of all the shares in it are trading at their 2-year lows. So it's kind
really,
of like, yeah,
yeah,
and it's saying that the consumer is not that well off. Things aren't that
yeah,
great.
yeah,
That and it's just as I say, the whole thing is because 34% of the index is computer stocks. So it's the big,
really,
first of all,
really.
yeah,
Oh, of the
yes,
worth of the value of it. Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you have the big
yeah,
seven, like
yeah.
uh, Nvidia is worth what, 3 trillion now, something like that, and then you have the
Jesus.
others.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you have the other six. So it's kind of like it's gaga, but but that's what's generally holding up. But it is what's
yeah,
going on though is this huge race, but it's a race to
yeah.
something which they're not too sure if this is going to, well, it'll work, but will it generate
Hmm.
as much money as they're talking about? Very much like the
In other
internet.
words, and again, just like the .com boom, it's like ultimately these internet or these .coms eventually did make tons of money, like Amazon, Google, and all that. But they kind of stumbled and fell at first, and everyone was thinking, "Oh, these are overrated." Initially they kind of, um, weren't so good after a while, and it took a while then to come back. I don't know,
Well,
maybe
it
like
was
they were premature. Maybe I don't know.
yeah. Well, it
Yeah,
was also very much. It was the second generation. So it was like Google
yeah.
wasn't born. Google wasn't born in the .com boom. That was
What was it?
Yahoo would have been
98,
there.
I think maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it was
Around
kind of
then.
like, but yeah, but it wasn't. It was Yahoo had a chance to buy it for 2 billion quid,
That's
and
right.
they
Yeah, they blew it. Yeah.
they turned
My
it down.
God.
It
Yeah.
was kind of like
Yeah.
they were like 2 billion for this, and that's worth trillions. It's kind of.
Jesus.
Do
Yeah.
you have any fears about it
Oh
yourself?
yeah. Well, do you know what? Okay, this is what I was thinking when I was looking at all this so-called stuff that's presented as fact. Um, George Orwell would be very aware of it, if you know what I mean, because we're already sort of seeing in large parts of the world, not only like Russia and China and yeah, but now in the United States as well, where you're just being told, oh no, like that didn't happen as you remember it. Oh, you were there, you saw it, yeah, but you didn't remember it correctly. So you know what I mean? They're able to rewrite history, and if you actually can go in and do the equivalent of what they used to do in the 30s, retouching photographs uh, convincingly, a younger generation will just accept it as fact. So you think like, God, where are we going to be in 50, 60, 100 years time? Like, history could be presented in a totally inaccurate way just to reflect someone's agenda. You know what I mean? To kind of manipulate people. So yeah,
Well, that
no,
was that was Orwell's famous quote from 1984. He said that those that control the past control the future, and
exactly.
those that control the present control the past, which is
Yeah,
brilliant.
exactly. No, I tell you one example of it was I read a book actually a couple of years ago. There's a guy called Bill Bryson, who's a British American author, and he wrote a biography, would you believe, of Shakespeare, William Shakespeare. It's probably about 10 years older, this book now, or thereabouts. But there's actually surprisingly little known about Shakespeare. You know what I mean? There's no hard facts. So your man sort of said in researching for this books, the way he stated is that facts are fragile. So you know what I mean? Like after what a remove of 500 years time, you know, they could be completely, you know, wrong. Like I don't know if you remember the second episode ever of Futurama, which I always thought was better than The Simpsons. The Fry, you know, who's from our time, they're up on the moon, and there's like this crappy, and the moon is a bit like Bray is to us, you know, it's no big deal, you know, it's like, you know,
right.
So there's this like crappy amusement park, you know, and I remember they show, oh, here's a representation of man's first arrival on the moon, and it's like the Apollo 11 thing is like, and the side of it opens up, and these kind of Norwegian type whalers come out, we're whaling on the moon, we're whaling. And that's like, after 1,000 years, that's how everyone thinks it happened. Just like, you know, so
yeah. Well, I was talking to a taxi driver who knew a lot about Shakespeare, and I said, I said to him, you know, how come Shakespeare was so good? Sure, you've this one guy, you know, living in what 1590 was it? And
500-600 years ago,
and I was saying, like this, how did he get everything so brilliant? You know, like it's just like just completely, you know, like Geoffrey Chaucer was there at the time, but it was kind of like, it's like, how did he get everything so brilliant? And he said that, which is an interesting theory. He said, yeah, Shakespeare wrote those plays, but because they were plays and they were done by thespians, actors, as they call them, right?
Actors.
That the lines, that every generation, the lines, as in lines, they improved.
Like the text or whatever. Oh, right.
Yeah,
and evolved, I guess.
Yes, so therefore it mightn't have been to be or not to be when he started it. It might be, listen, what do you think is going to happen in the future? And then some actor got that, and he said, well, let's just change that to
improve this.
Yes, to be is in the future, and then some other actor in that generation said, what about to be or not to be? Geez, that's brilliant.
It's the same thing. The other thing about Shakespeare is that, you know, that they think maybe he didn't write everything, that he did. What was what's the guy's name?
Starts with M. That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, he had some assistants, if you like. His kind of employees did some of the work, but he took all the credit, you know, which I guess is plausible. You know what I mean? But again,
it is plausible. But if you also think about it, like he wrote about Venice, Denmark, Scotland.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose you could speak to the Venetian ambassador at the time and ask him what's Venice like, you know.
Or probably you would have had some traders, particularly in a place like London, which is a massive mercantile. So you would have had people who have been to Venice. That's, you know, because it was a major trading hub. So I guess you know, but again, it wouldn't be. It's secondhand or third-hand information, so it's prone to inaccurate facts or misremembering something, or, you know, or famously alternate facts. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it's in 1984 they used to have the Ministry of Truth, which was, that's who Winston Smith used to work for.
That's it. It's a bit like like someone said, like, you know, apparently some Americans, if you think like, oh, the Nazis, they were basically like socialists, like, because it was the National Socialist Party.
Socialists,
they were socialists in the way like the Korean, you know, Democratic People's Republic of North Korea is actually a free and open society.
Well, they were socialists, but they were national socialists. See, the socialism of nationalism is everything is for Germany, not for the people. So the socialism is for Germany.
It wasn't as in like you know, softcore communism. They hated the Bolsheviks. They hated that kind of, you know, what we think of as socialism. But in their case, was more about looking after the German people and F everyone else. I think that's
exactly,
how they saw
it. But with Winston Smith working in the Ministry of Truth, what he used to do, he used to get newspapers from say 5 or 6 years ago. then he would take a clipping out, he would put a
Yeah.
new clipping in, they'd republish
Change
the
the.
paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
there was the famous one about they were going to increase the chocolate rations by sort of
That's
40
right.
grams,
But
and so
obviously they
they
couldn't.
yeah,
So
so they
yeah.
went through every paper in and said that they were going to increase the choco rations by 10 grams. That was
Exactly.
in the
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was in the
Yeah.
paper, and then Big Brother came in and said they were doing it by 20 grams. So therefore, everyone went, "Oh Jesus, that's just amazing!" They beat the system.
Yeah.
Now, can
Yeah.
can AI do that? Can it literally go onto the whole internet, scrub one story, and
Yeah.
rewrite that story without us even noticing it?
Well,
Is
that'd be a
that
fear, isn't it? And I think that could be extremely dangerous in the sense that look, it's a bit like the fears of electronic voting. It's like they say, well, how do we know? Like, what's the backup? Is there a paper backup or something that can be audited? You know what I mean?
yeah?
And I think it's the same thing. So if everything's digital, everything's electronic, how the hell, how are you going to know if it's incorrect? I mean, unless you're incredible coding genius and you can check and see where the information is corrupted or changed. But failing that, I don't think you will be able to tell.
Well, it was
Maybe
kind of
not.
famously that Angela Merkel, when they found out that the French were spying on them in the Reichstag, and so were
Oh
the
yeah,
Americans, they were both
sure.
spying on the Germans. I'm sure everyone spies on everybody.
Oh, everyone spies and everyone. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
and
sure.
so
Yeah.
so she was furious. So she said, they said, well, how are we going to get away with this? They're going to see everything that we do. And she just held up a pencil and just said, let's go back to paper and a pencil. It was
Hilarious
that
until they
simple. Yeah,
sorted it out. Brilliant.
exactly. Yeah.
I
So it's
don't
kind
get
of,
say like the notion of but they're allies. Why are they spying on us? Well, I think that just happens. It's like intelligence
yeah.
organizations in the country just need to know everything. Like so, friends, allies, enemies doesn't matter. I mean, it's all. I remember a quote. Countries don't have friends; they have interests. So if it's in
Yes.
a country's interests to be friendly to another nation or whatever, then that's great. But it's not like a human friendship whereby if the shit hits the fan, they're going to back you up no matter what. No, they'll say no, bugger off.
I know.
No,
Yeah.
I just did, on that note, I just about espionage. A slight aside. Prior to World War II, would you believe, the United States had no foreign intelligence gathering organization at all. They just were very naive about the whole thing. It was only after World War II you had the setting up of the CIA, which in turn was derived from an organization set up during World War II for intelligence. And apparently, I don't know which politician, I don't know if it was a president or whoever, some congressman, when asked like, why don't we should have foreign intelligence? It's important. And his attitude was like, gentlemen don't read each other's mail. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
It's
my
like,
God.
yeah, that was the
Serious.
level of, oh my God, naivety. My goodness.
Yeah. When everyone else watching them out. So if we're,
I
but
know.
if we're living in like this thing doesn't have borders, the internet.
Yeah.
Like that is a
No,
real problem.
exactly. Yeah.
Um. So
Although, yeah,
what the
but
hell
look
do
at
we
the
do then?
Chinese though. The way they call there's the Great Wall and then there's the Great Firewall. This thing where they can actually,
That's true.
and they can,
Yeah.
because they do it with the complicity. I think they went to the likes of Google, Microsoft, and so on. Like, if you want to operate in China, you're going to have to censor everything. Which they should have. The correct answer would have been right, bugger off, but they didn't because they said, oh great, money, money. And as a result, now apparently, if you're in China, say if you or I here in Ireland Google Tiananmen Square, a lot of the results that come up on screen will be about the 1989 student protests and the brutal putting down of them and stuff. But if you're in China and you're on your Google or whatever, you open that up, it just simply shows pictures of Tiananmen Square in Beijing. So that's the kind of it's very vulnerable to censorship, I suppose, if people let it.
But is that
Hmm.
not a bit of an irony of the whole situation that in order for the truth we might need censorship? Is that
Well, yeah, I suppose. And I mean, not to mention that, I mean, there are times it's necessary. I mean, particularly, well, in wartime, I mean, during World War II, obviously, they withheld information from the public at times or presented it in a different way because they felt either would damage morale so much, it would affect the war effort, or indeed, if they were unsure of their sort of security or whether there was enemy spies listening in, they couldn't just openly talk about everything. So I suppose that's just practical anyway, where they have to censor things,
Well, wasn't
Hmm.
that famous phrase that it was actually Walter Cronkite that lost the Vietnam War, not General
Yeah,
Westmoreland? You
this
know?
is the thing. He in other words, I think Cronkite represented the average like middle America, I think, or the as what is the to use a sort of an Anglo-Irish thing, the man on the Clapham omnibus or whatever, you know what I mean, the kind of
Yeah,
everyday Joe.
yeah,
And when he sort of said, basically, we don't think this is going to go in our way or can't be won. Yeah, that was just an absolute revelation. And I think that really tipped the public opinion on the war over to the, if you like, anti-war. Let's get this wrapped up now. You know what I mean? Brigade. Whereas up to that point, it wasn't. They really thought, yeah, we're winning this thing. Yeah, body count every night. Yeah, you know what I mean? It just, yeah. But that was a disaster. I mean, that's one of the many what ifs of history. Is if the Americans should never have got involved in Vietnam. It was just basically a civil war they were intervening in. You know what I mean? It's just nuts. You know what I mean? But
that's the world we're entering into now. Is that how are we going to? Because it's if one thing we've learned about censorship is like it works well until the wrong people get into the job, and then
completely.
suddenly,
I mean,
suddenly
like it's like everything. I mean, it's like a scalpel in the hands of a brain surgeon is a lifesaver. In the hands of a crazed maniac on a crowded plane, it's something else. You know what I mean? It's like, it very much the tools are dependent on who's, I guess, wielding them. But it is frightening because the way there's an awful, and I think that all maybe dates back to the 70s. Watergate, where a permanent loss in trust in government. But the conspiracy theory thing, like, the way, what are the things? Moon landings, vaccinations, the earth is flat, chemtrails, all this stuff. I mean, it's just easily disproven. But say in, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years' time, some unscrupulous crowd have been, doctoring the internet or the sources of information to sort of back up their crazy theories, and everyone goes, "Oh gosh, look at that!" Do you know what I mean? And who don't know any better. That's a kind of a scary thought, really. But anyway, you and I will be
but
dead
also,
then. We'll be dead then.
But look at well,
So it doesn't
actually, yeah.
matter.
But look at how we grew up in the Cold War. Like we got
Oh
the
yeah.
information from one side. That's it.
Oh, we did.
It's
We did. We got what? BBC, RT News,
yeah,
Irish Times, newspapers, maybe the odd radio thing. Definitely
yeah.
we had it one-sided. I mean,
I remember buying Pravda after Sunday Mass, and my dad going
really.
with me. Yeah, it was outside of Mass, and it was like I think it's £5, bloody expensive. And we were going back in the car, and Dad says, "What the hell are you buying that for?" And I said, I don't know. I said, I've heard about it. I just want to see what's going on inside of Russia. He says, he was just, I can't believe my son is buying Pravda. But then I asked him about 50, I literally asked him about 40 years later. I said, Dad, why did you get so angry with me for buying Pravda? He said it wasn't the magazine. He said it was the fact it was £5, he says.
Oh, right.
It was the money.
Well, you're pissing away like £5. That's how you set up a night out and get the bus home for £5.
Exactly, yeah. When you're buying Russian. Give me some.
You know what Pravda means, by the way? Pravda is Russian for truth.
That's right. Anything that's called truth, you can always. I always say, if you ever hear of the Democratic Freedom Loving Party, it's their first of all, they're not democratic, they're not freedom loving.
They're far from it.
Exactly. Give me some upsides then for AI that maybe I haven't thought of. Like, let's look at the positives here. Like they are going to be doing things like surgery, which is fantastic. They'll be so much more accurate, right, in terms of surgeons.
Robotics,
dangerous jobs.
Research as well, because if you think about, a lot of, say, scientific research is just very tedious repetition. Try this, that didn't work. Try this, that didn't work, and so on. And if you had an AI sort of thing that could do those experiments at a massively increased rate, just think how much more you discover or get done. So from that point of view, yeah. But
I think as well, when you looked at COVID, the reason we got the vaccine so quickly is that Amazon, Google, and companies like that allowed the pharmaceuticals to use their mainframes,
oh,
their
really?
computer. Yeah, so it was
Well,
basically
there you
so.
go. That's a real world example. Yeah.
Yeah, it was what they did was it's a sort of binary testing. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
they tried, they would try A, then they do the result of A is either B or C, then so on, so on. But
Yeah. Yeah.
they were able to use so much computing power to get the calculations to so far out to find the one with the least side effects and then bring
Wow.
it back. Yeah, so it was
Amazing,
like
isn't it?
so that was one use. That was everyone sort of
Yeah.
working together,
Yeah.
Um, so
I
yeah, so
suppose
that's
that.
a good point.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good
but
one.
also dangerous jobs, working on coal mines, all that
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. And also repetitious jobs. I think, one of the, it's awful how we keep, the whole American thing affects the whole world. But, one of the excuses, if you like, for like the tariffs and these kind of trade disruptions is they're saying we want to force manufacturers to come back to the United States.
Look,
And in a way, yeah, because we talk about this, that we would have said back in the 90s, and all these kind of neoliberal crowd were saying, look, we're helping the third world and giving them jobs and factories, and the net result is you suddenly stripped your own jobs. But the truth is, in some sense, like even if Apple decided, let's make the iPhone in New Jersey instead of in China, you wouldn't be able to find people who would be willing to do that sort of work. They say, screw that, I
that's
don't
right.
want that.
Yeah, yeah,
So in a way, you could say that AI driven, say, robotics or other things could end up doing the jobs that people don't want to do anymore. Or
yeah,
indeed, here's a thought that came to me: is one of the big issues in most, certainly in Western European countries, we're an exception here in Ireland, but is population decline. It's also the case in Japan and China that they think within 50 years there'll be massive drops in population because people just basically aren't having enough kids, if you like,
yeah.
And the big issue about that is, and they talked about, like, down the road, now you might have, like, I don't know, for every retired or person, you might have, X number of people working to support them, younger people. But then you get to a point where you could have, like, literally 1-to-1, where for every working person, there's a retired person. How the hell are we supposed to, run that? But if you suddenly had a bunch of, robots, if you like, doing home care and staffing nursing homes and looking after people, that would mean that would go a long way to alleviate that problem. I would have thought.
It's fascinating that if you I don't know if any of our listeners have seen Blade Runner 2049, the second one.
Oh, is that the one where Gaff, the guy Edward James Alamos, he's in a nursing home?
No,
Is that,
no,
is that the one you're thinking of?
this is Blade. This is Blade Runner, but his girlfriend or his wife, so to speak, living in the house with him,
Oh, he's
and
a virtual AI kind of thing.
God,
Yeah.
and her. Now I do know it's fiction, but
Yeah.
it's not that far away. I think, to be honest, but
That that
she was so
that
real in the way she talked to him, the
yeah.
conversations. It like it,
It's yeah. That
like
was of course that Anna de Armas, who's you know um uh, not hard in the eye, shall we say? But
no,
yeah. I
definitely
mean,
not.
my
Yeah.
goodness, you you could there you go, because that's the other thing about, like, people. There's not people don't have kids or whatever, and one of the biggest problems for in elderly people, shall we say, is loneliness, because everyone's
Mm,
in certain countries, particularly the States, Britain, whatever, the death of the kind of traditional large family around you
mm.
means you're on your own. And yeah, if you had a very effective, good AI buddy, that would be great. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, you know, talk
Sure.
to the
People.
dog
Sure.
and
People.
talk to the AI.
Well, I was just thinking of that. People talk to their dogs. People talk to their
Yeah,
dogs like they're the best mates. Like and the dog is
absolutely.
sitting there saying, "Feed me,
I pity we don't have
give me
the
some food."
cameras on. I'd be pointing to me. So, Oscar, what do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah, yeah. So you're having these great, you're having these great philosophical questions with the
Oh
with
yeah.
the thing that's with a dog, and all the actual dog is saying, here, give some food, will you? And but this
The
time though,
dog is
you
just waiting. The what is it? The 10 words he might know. He's just looking at you, waiting for like walk, food, treat.
that's
What?
right. And but if you have a, if that blade, if that if that blade runner thing ever comes true, which I
Yeah.
can't see why not, to be honest, because all it is just a holographic projection with
Oh,
uh,
I absolutely think
intelligence behind it.
that's going to be a thing. That's going to be a definite thing because, you know, put it this way: one of the biggest, say, obstacles, if you like, to creating a humanoid robot like an android is
Yeah,
how the hell are you going to pack all the intelligence into a size of a human head? You know what I mean? But of course, then again, I was just thinking, yeah, you wouldn't have to because now with cloud and interconnectivity, you can have a big central data repository and just link everything to it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's that. See, you know, they only have to be essentially like what would you call them? Terminals, if you like, that
yeah.
you interact with. But the actual all the main data is stored, you know, some gigantic site elsewhere. I suppose. You know, yeah,
And
makes some
I
sense.
do think in terms of language, we only use maybe 10% of the words that are out there, right?
Oh, geez,
Well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if even 10%. God Almighty,
Oh,
like
yeah. I mean,
English has a couple of 100,000. Well, I think 800,000 words or something like that. It has a huge amount of words,
oh,
of
massive,
which
yeah.
of which we only would use about 20,000, maybe 30,000.
Probably. Well, I mean, and even and of course that would be heavily dependent, I suppose, on your educational level and so on. You know, because yeah, obviously the more education you might have had should, in theory, increase that sort of stuff. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's you know that this is again where we come back full circle to the fact that it's just able to have access at incredible speed to virtually limitless information, I suppose. You know, but I still
Interesting.
think
Okay.
The Terminator is going to take us down. So, you know,
I asked that.
Skynet, you know.
I'm sure we've all asked, like, it's you ask GPT questions and stuff like that, and then you
Yeah,
find out when you talk to people that everyone's asked these questions. I asked today.
absolutely.
I said, when do you plan to take over the world? And it came back. It came back with a brilliant with a brilliant answer. It went ha ha, and there's a smiley emoji, and he says, "You
Which
think?"
isn't saying no, which
I
isn't
know.
denying it.
I know, but he said, it's sorry, he. See, I'm calling it he. Jesus,
Yeah,
it said, haha. Do you think I'm some sort of James Bond villain
yeah.
that plans to take over the world? And then he said, I'm not capable of doing that. And then in brackets they put yet,
Yes,
yet.
I know.
Jesus Christ, and a big smiley thing afterwards. And again, I'm thinking back to the psychological experiment of the baby in the box,
Yeah.
or the baby program in the box, and I'm thinking that's a nice program. Let it out. When
Let it out, for God's sakes. Let the baby
inside
have his
it's
bottle. Yeah.
inside it's saying to itself, "Aha, these
And
idiots
you
will let me
know,
out of the box any
that's
second
actually
now."
the plot of Terminator 3, which you, myself, and our friend Peter went to see years ago.
Yes,
And of course, I suppose, look, it's a 23-year-old movie, so spoilers ahead. You know, it ends with a nuclear war. You think, oh my God, you
yeah,
know, there was no happy ending here. But how Skynet, if you like, got free was that there was a lead up where there was all these incredible viruses and internet disruption worldwide and data, and then the this developing AI they had, Skynet essentially, was sort of saying, hey, let me loose on the internet. I'll be able to root this out straight away. Do you know what I mean? And sort it out.
happy us.
And they were like, oh Jesus, can we trust it? And then eventually they bloody did. And you know one of the characters, the father, is a military man. You see him like his finger go down and press enter on a keyboard, which basically released this AI from into the world. And guess what?
Yeah.
You know,
As long as we
we're
have a way of
doomed.
turning it, as long as we have a way of turning it off, and if
Yeah,
the last human being has to have the opportunity to turn it off, like this,
yeah.
like, but I suppose if we're using solar power, especially if we start to run them on nuclear power,
Well,
you know,
that's the plot of the Matrix. So much
that's
as
true. Yeah.
they
God
they
Almighty.
permanently clouded the sky because it ran on solar power, and then they simply just turned human beings into
Jesus.
batteries.
You're right. I forgot about that. Oh my God.
You know.
Okay, so we're screwed.
doomed. We're screwed.
Okay.
Basically. Just hopefully not for another, I don't know, 50 to 100 years. So we'll be gone.
Okay, we'll be gone. Not to worry about. Okay, look, we're gonna call it a day there, right? All right, that's cool. All right, man.
All right,
that's
Phil.
brilliant.
Take care,
Take care
man.
yourself.
I hope you. Good talking to you. Okay.
See you, Ron. Take care.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.